Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 413 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited that you are here and excited for my guest today, who I did meet a few years ago and I've been quietly following along with for the last few years. And I thought, you know what? It is time we bring her on the show. She has built so much in the New York running community, and she just has a lot to offer. She has a really fun and edgy vibe to her, and I think you're going to love following along. And definitely, if you have the opportunity, go along to one of the events she is hosting. They are always really special. So today, I'm excited to welcome Jessie Zapo to the podcast. Jessie is a performance coach for Adidas. She is the girls Run NYC founder, and she has built a lot within the running community. She is one of the key people that has really built that culture of run community, run crews, run movement. And I'm excited for you to get to know her. So let's go thank one of our sponsors. We'll be right to this episode with Jessie Zapo. You have heard me raving about HydroPack for a while now. I really believe their products are the future. They have innovated in incredible ways to really take the hydration game forward. And I really got to witness this firsthand when I was at Western States a few weekends ago. I got to see all the elite athletes carrying the HydroPack Sky Flasks among their other packs that went into their vests. But the Sky Flask I saw over and over again by the world's best ultra runners. And if they can carry these for 100 miles and feel good about them, I mean, I think that's good for the rest of us, right? I've been talking to you about the Sky Flask Speed 350 for a long time now. I love that it has the flip top lid for easy refill. It crunches down or smushes down really small so you can stuff it in any pocket. It has a really easy to handle little strap. And you can put it in your dishwasher if that's something you want to do. The strap is adjustable, which I love. And it is hands down my favorite item at HydroPack. I encourage you to get yourself one. That is one of the best things environmentally you can do, is continue this movement of getting us to bring our own fuel. As I said, it's got that flip top lid, so it's really easy to refill, really easy to drink, and it molds to your hands. I promise you, if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. You will love it. Now, as a friend of mine, you can get 10% off with code TINAMUIR10. That's TINAMUIR 10 at hydropack.com. That is going to give you 10% off your order. I definitely encourage you to go check out the Sky Flask Speed 350. Get yourself a few of them. If you tend to drink a lot, you can also get the 500 ml size, and there's an insulated version of the 500. Head over to HydroPack, that's HYDRAPAK.com. Use code TINAMUIR10 for 10% off. Jessie, welcome to the Running for Real podcast. I'm excited that you are here.
Thanks, Tina.
So you and I met in, I think it must have been 2023 at Peachtree. Either you had just spoken or I had just spoken. We were like flip-flopping, talking at the Atlanta Peachtree 10K. And I had so much fun at that whole weekend. Like, that was a great event. And I saw you did it again this year. So it seems to be like maybe a regular thing for you with your work at Adidas and the tie to Atlanta Track Club. But, you and I'm actually surprised we haven't crossed paths more in the past years with the connections that we have, the things that we're involved with. And I want to get to talking about many of the projects that you're working on and the ways that you fiercely uplift and elevate women, which I think is such an important thing. But I do want to begin by going backwards with something I read about you online, of talking about in high school, having a feeling of flying during, I can't remember if it was like a track practice or a race. But yeah, and you said you still remember it so vividly. So would you start with sharing that with us? Because I think a lot of people would probably either recognize a moment like that, maybe in their adult life rather than their high school if they saw it as a punishment, or kind of strive for that and like to know what that would feel like. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Tina. I love that you found that memory because it really is a core memory for me. And it was probably 7th grade, so even pre-high school.
Okay.
I will never forget that moment because it's also very tied to my relationship with my father, in that it was a field day at the end of the school year. A lot of schools do, last day of school, you go out and do all these field events, and they just throw you into different things. And so I was put into the 4x100. I had never run track before. It might have even been 6th grade, to be honest. I knew nothing about running, other than what kids run around to do. And I was good at it. And I just remember, like, I have this image in my mind, almost like outside of my body, seeing myself doing it. I was a kid that had like a fast growth spurt when I was around, like, I guess 11 or 12. So I got really tall, but I was very awkward in terms of like knobby knees and like kind of just long legs, but that didn't really fit my body at that time, or I didn't feel like I was in my body. So that was a moment where my body was working and it was running and it felt fast and amazing. And the funny story was that my parents were there. This is one of the odd times that they were there at a school event. And my dad leaned over to my mom and said, "Hey, that girl, she's really good." My mom said, "That's Jessie. It's your daughter."
So wait, he didn't realize at the time that was you?
No. I think they were sitting up in the stands or the bleachers or something.
Oh wow, this was an intense field day if you got bleachers.
I know. I mean, honestly, like, such an interesting kind of random memory, but it stayed with me, and I ran track and field after that. It was one of those moments where you realize a talent that you have. I think that's pivotal for young people. And it's my first real memory of running.
Wow. And do you feel after that, as you continue to run in high school and you did go through your journey as a runner, did that feeling continue to come back to you, or was it you were always chasing it, or you just kind of, as you said, I'm thinking of, like, if anyone's seen Inside Out or Inside Out 2, they talk about like core memories and they like store them in this bank. Was it just, it was kind of always there, but not a conscious thought that you would have?
I think I still to this day feel that way when I'm on the track.
Okay. Love that.
And the track is a happy place for me, even though I'm not like competing in track events. It's actually the core of where my current running project, Girls Run NYC, that's where we meet weekly. And it's just such a happy place to be. I feel like running fast, whatever that means, like my fast now is very different because it's geared towards a different phase of my life, and it's 30 years later or more than 30 years later. But just that feeling that you get from setting foot on a track, and that I haven't ever lost, which is really beautiful.
I love that. So then with that, I want to just, before we continue on with your journey, you have done a lot in terms of building run community for other people. You're also the performance coach for Adidas, and heavily involved within the Adidas running community. With that, you must have seen all experience levels, all abilities, all background, a diverse, beautiful, rich mix of people coming into this sport. What are some of the things that you have learned kind of coming into it, being someone who had a talent for it and was good at it and kind of was able to pursue it, to seeing how other people enter the sport and how we're all on a very different journey, even if there's the same start and finish? What are some of the things that you've learned through those experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what's interesting is that I had a talent for sprinting. I got into distance running in my 20s, and I would say I did not have a talent for distance running, in that it's a different sport. It's really hard, and I think very humbling. And I'll never forget the first 5K that I signed up for in Prospect Park. I moved to Brooklyn when I was in my 20s to come to grad school. And I had always ran like for myself after high school, but 1 or 2 miles. Like a 2-mile run was my like long run. And so I moved to Brooklyn and I would run Prospect Park because I lived close. The loop of Prospect Park is like 3.4 miles. So that pushed me up to running 3 miles, which I felt like that's a lot. That's a lot for me. Yeah. And so I signed up for this 5K. And I remember they were like, okay, it's self-seated, so just go in the pack where you think you should be. And I was like, oh, okay, on the starting line. So I like walked up to the starting line and then proceeded to be very humbled by that race, and still was like, I was like, okay, I guess I'm not running 6-minute miles, but I'm very proud of myself for doing it. I remember sending the guy I was dating at the time, like sending him a text and saying, I just ran my first 5K. And he was like, what's your time? And I told him my time, and he was like, that's not even fast. And, and I thought about that recently because I was like, we have such a range of people who come out and run with Girls Run and with my other projects with Adidas runners. And I have an athlete right now who she is really, really happy to be running 15 minutes per mile. And like, we've worked really hard to get her there. Mm-hmm. And I'm super proud of her. And I'm just like, yeah, I feel so lucky that here in the US, we have an expansive idea about what running is, who can run, who's allowed to be a runner, which is everybody. And how you can do it. And I think still that doesn't exist everywhere. And we're often fighting against preconceived ideas of who we have to be or what we should be. But I would say my distance running journey was really about working really hard to be average and accepting that and like feeling good about that. And in being like an average runner, also like pushing what that means, which is like also making extraordinary choices for how I want to be. So
what do you mean by that? Like, what are some of those choices that you made?
I guess what I mean by that is like dedicating my life to it. I think about how my day fits around running and how it fits around training. I've somehow am here living a life of sports after having a whole other career, or maybe 2 careers before that. And those are choices like day in and day out. Those are a lot of the choices that the people I run with make, which is how do I fit training for a 100-mile race into my very busy life as a, career person. Mm-hmm. So I think I love to tell my mom, because I like to tease her, because she's always like, "You're so great. You're special." You know, she's one of those moms that's like, "You are so special."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Actually, Mom, I am extraordinarily ordinary." And I'm happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My mom is also one of those people who, sometimes it's like, why doesn't it mean anything when I say I'm proud? I'm like, well, because you say it all the time. So it's lost some of its meaning, Mum. I guess I like to be chased or something. I don't know.
Yes.
But no, that's, you said about learning to embrace that and learning to accept that. Particularly us coming off the Olympic period right now, and seeing all these extraordinary athletes and people being inspired to try something or to do something or to get back to running or to get into running, and then kind of having to face that fact of like, okay, these are the best in the world and I see how good they are, and that's not me. Like, what are some of the ways that you did learn to embrace and accept that?
Yeah, I was just talking about this with an athlete I coach, how I feel like this year the Olympics have been telling this story of how hard all of these athletes have been working, in particular because Tokyo came at a time where the world was turned upside down and people maybe didn't get to train the way that they had in the past, and dealing with like mental health issues related to the pandemic. And so this Olympics now in Paris feels like the opportunity that a lot of athletes maybe were in Tokyo, and now they've had this opportunity for another shot and have really put in so much work. And that's what I have seen by watching the Olympics, is how hard all of these athletes have worked to be there and to be competing on the level that they are, which has been extraordinary. And that inspires me, as someone who's not doing those types of endeavors. But for me, it says, yeah, put the hard work in, like do the workout that you don't feel like doing. Because that's the difference maker for me as an individual, but also for these athletes that are competing on the highest stage. And, you know, also in my work with adidas, I get to hang out sometimes with a Noah Lyles, right? Like we've been on shoots together in his early career. And I also understand that like, we're not that different, right? Like athletes who are performing on the highest level are not that different than us amateur athletes who are out here dedicating time out of our days to be our best self. So I don't feel like, oh, we're really different. I actually feel like you can see the best in yourself by watching these athletes perform.
Friends, I am so excited to introduce you to one of our brand new partners. And you've probably seen them around because they are growing so fast and doing such impressive things that I'm really enjoying. Runna is the #1 rated running coaching app in the world with 20,000 5-star reviews. And they're on a mission to make running as easy, effective, and enjoyable as possible. They do this through creating personalized running plans for all abilities, ranging from those starting their running journeys, you know, those doing couch to 5K, all the way up to 230 marathon elite runners. All of their plans are built by Olympic athletes and expert coaches. So let me tell you a little more. They have strength and conditioning plans that are running specific and full body. That's easily in addition to your training. You can have your strength and conditioning in the same place. They have integrated mobility and Pilates plans. If those of you like me who are not typically good at that stuff, it's right there for you on the app. They have calendar syncing. And best of all, my favorite part, you can connect with like-minded runners in the community section of the app. Now, Runna has really been doing a lot within the running space to support the running community. And I've really loved watching all that they have been doing, the events that they've been showing up at. If you see a runner event near you, go to it. It is really amazing to see. Finally, as you are a friend of mine, if you use code running for real, that's running, FORREAL, running for real, you can get yourself 2 weeks for free by going to Runna, the app Runna, RUNNA, that's Runna, RUNNA in your app store, and using the code running for real. That will give you 2 free weeks. You can check it out. You can fall in love with it. And I can't wait to hear what you think. I love that. And do you see, I'm just curious, I haven't fully baked this question as you were talking about this, and especially getting to see some of these athletes. While there definitely are examples of, teams and groups that have people that work together, I think that's one of the nice things about, everyone else is that for those people, it's kind of a bit lonely. They have to do a lot of it themselves. They have to work hard, getting up themselves, going to the track by themselves at 7 a.m., them and their coach, or having to get a second run in on their own at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Whereas for the rest of us, we get to have the community piece, the other people, the motivation to dig deep to your own level, but you've also got people all around you. Can you speak to that piece as you get to see this with, all elements of your work, and then also these collectives and these groups that you are a part of?
Yes, I think community is so crucial in a lot of our journeys as people, but in particular when we're talking about sport. I think that there are some folks who have had the ability or opportunity to be athletes maybe from a younger age, where you have developed discipline and kind of understand a lot of the not fun work that goes into training. But so many people, and actually a passion of mine, is bringing adults into running and movement and fitness, in particular women. And I think, we've seen a dramatic change since I was a teenager in women's sports, which is amazing. That I hope more women don't have a gap in time where they are not playing sports. But from my experience, at the time that I grew up, there was very limited exposure to women's sports in the media. You weren't really seeing a lot of women coaches. You weren't seeing necessarily career paths. And so, and women hit puberty in a different way. So there's a lot of research to show that there's a point where a lot of girls drop out of sport. And then maybe come back to it later in their 20s, or even later. And so a lot of the work that I was doing with Girls Run NYC and with bridge runners and with adidas runners now is capturing adults who are interested in finding that again or for the first time. And so if you maybe didn't have that discipline to know that you can show up a day in and day out to do this thing and it's hard, but you can do it. Community is actually one of the best ways to start to build that, because it's the motivation to do something fun also. Because as adults, you're well, do I have to do this? No. Maybe I would rather do something fun after work. But if there's a fun community that you're looking forward to seeing, it makes it a lot easier to show up and do those hard things.
Yeah.
So I think what we've seen a lot is, and in particular, what I like doing is taking people on this training journey, which is sometimes it's easier to say, I can join you for 6 to 8 weeks. And in those 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to give me 2 days of your week or 3 days of your week. and we're going to train for this thing. With some of the women I work with now in like ultra running, it's more like 4 months. Like, you're going to give me 4 months of your life, and we're going to go on this journey together. But it's what I've seen from that is it's really empowering. It's helping people get through the tough parts of training, which is probably 85% of training.
Yeah.
It's not that fun. But it's so much more fun when you're doing it with a group.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to go into some of the, just more dive into the community side of what you've been building and why that's so important to you, both with Adidas and then your own groups. But before we get to that, you mentioned about like haven't seen examples of discipline and the media that you saw when you were younger. And I think for all of us, like another thing that stood out to me with the Paris Olympics is just the real emphasis and seeing all the different body types and all the different strengths and the ways that people can be the literal best in the world at something, and look completely different to one another, and celebrating that rather than seeing it as just like, what maybe the average 5K runner is what every athlete of every sport should look like. And even within the sports, even within our world of running and track and field, but even just within track, like seeing the different body types there as well. So is that something that you've kind of noticed as well with regards to the Olympics and just in general within running that, with your work with Adidas, I'm assuming you've also searched for people who maybe look a bit different to what was always modeled when we were younger.
Yeah. I think my first experience with being part of a running group was outside of growing up, was joining the New York City Bridge Runners when I was in my early 20s. And it was a ragtag group of folks that got into running because this guy, Mike Sace, had to run. I mean, his fun origin story is that he was in Williamsburg. He needed to pick up his son from school. He couldn't get a cab, so he ran over the bridge. And then he was like, oh my God, I need to do this. Like, I need to do this for my health and my life. And so then he started getting some of his friends to do it. And it was graffiti writers and like musicians and artists. And it was just like people that maybe had never run before or hadn't done sports before. And I was bartending in downtown and in grad school, and he lived like across from the bar I worked at and kept inviting me. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I'm not a runner. Like, I don't think I'm going to be in a run club. But he was also like so non-intimidating that when I did show up, I felt so welcomed, and they were so excited that I was there because I was the only girl. It was a bunch of guys. And it was really like the ethos I try to maintain to this day, which is like, we're so happy you're here. Like, whoever shows up. And he also had this kind of mantra, like, just show up, which we use in a lot of all of my community messaging is like, just show up. Like, the hardest part is just showing up. And it's the scariest part, is like breaking that ice. But, I fought really hard with Adidas runners from the beginning for it to be pace inclusive. And I was like, we have to have a group that we have to hire pacers who are going to run 11 minutes per mile or slower. Knowing that if we do that, people are going to show up for it. And so ultimately we've built this like every pace has a place idea, which is really around like everyone should have an opportunity to get started. And with that, all different types of people, all different bodies, all different walks of life. I think actually one of my favorite things about being a part of run communities is that we often never know what anyone else does for work. It's like you like show up to the run and you do the runs, and like maybe you're like, what pace are you going to run? Or like sometimes you find out what someone does for work like years later. And I love that that's not the first thing that comes out of people's mouth. And what's so cool about that is like you end up having, like, I remember we had on our team pacers in our community. We had someone who was a doctor who worked at Sloan Kettering, and we had someone who worked for the Department of Transportation, like mowing the grass, and they were like best buddies, right? Like, and it's like that. Like, how else would you bring people together across different walks of life? And that's, to me, that's the power of community. And going back to your original like thought starter on the Olympics, it's the same too with all these new sports we see, and all of the like inclusivity around even things like skateboarding being an Olympic sport. It's like, it's amazing to recognize just people wanting to excel in all these different ways. And that, like women's wrestling, I saw like the outcome of women's wrestling, and I was like, it's so amazing that a girl now in high school can have a path to be a professional wrestler.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's incredible. And the Olympics hopefully is also going to inspire a lot of people, a lot of young people this time around.
Yeah. Well, and then that's where those community pieces come into play, because the easiest way to, as you said earlier, to get going on something or to stick to something is to surround yourself with a community and other people who you are accountable to, and have told you're going to show up. And yeah, if you see a big mix of people, and we've talked a lot on this show about, I've had so many run club, run crew leaders over the years who have talked about just how critical it is, as you said, that first time someone shows up, to make sure that they feel welcomed, that they belong, that they're not going to get left behind, because it can not only change everything on that day and the way that person sees that particular group, but their potential to show up for other things. Do you take that responsibility very seriously with what you do? And how do you do that for someone listening who might be starting a run group or have a run group, and they feel, maybe there's some faster people that are starting to show up and it's getting pulled out? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Couple of thoughts. One, when I was coming up with what Girls Run NYC would be, it was after having at least 3 different running projects that I worked on for over a decade. And every time I work on something, I'm like, what's the problem to solve? Like, how do we solve this problem and this problem? And how does it fit? How are we making something that is meaningful and maybe doesn't exist? Or, for me, it's always like, what's the best iteration now based off what I've learned? And losing people on the run is always the worst, because the reality is you've got maybe the majority of people are in this middle group, and there's always people on the front, and there's always people on the back. And so how do you account for that and accommodate for that in a way that feels good to you? For me with Girls Run, I said, well, I want to be able to run this in a sustainable way where I can keep showing up. And if it's only me leading, I can do it. And obviously I can't be in all places. So that was when I got my USATF coaching certification for track and field, and I made it a track workout. And even though track sounds intimidating, maybe as a starting point, the reason why I did it there was because it's a contained environment where people can run different paces and be at very different levels. And this is our 10th year
That's awesome.
in that format, which is great. And I think, obviously every group is not for everyone. So the way that we run it works for the women who keep coming back. And we've had people over the years that came and were like, maybe they wanted to be more competitive because we said it's track. So they're thinking this is going to be like a competitive track workout. We actually have designed it so that you could be brand new every time. We have new people every single time that we run the workouts, and we've designed it in a way where if you come every week, it's still challenging for you because we have different pace groups. But if you're there for the first time, we're going to teach you how to run on a track.
Fueling my body with whole foods is important, but I have to admit mine is not perfect. That's always why I start my day with AG1. I come down the stairs, I fill up my jug with water, put in a scoop of AG1, and it ensures that I'm filling any nutritional gaps that I might be missing with the food that I'm eating. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers daily nutrients and gut health support and is backed by multiple research studies so you can trust what you're putting in your body. I trust AG1 because unlike so many products, the entire formula is backed by research studies, not just the ingredients. If you care about the food you put in your body, why should the supplement you put in be any different? I know my body by this point, and I know that I'm missing some points nutritionally, but I know that I also am not able to absorb everything that comes in. With AG1, I'm prioritizing my body, and I'm also giving it the gut health that I have found to be really important to feeling good. Digestion is one of the most important factors in helping your body to receive high quality nutrition. And in a recent study, they found that AG1 doubled the amount of healthy bacteria in our gut, specifically 2 of the most prominent species known to support gut and whole body health. If there is one product I trust to support my whole body health, it's AG1. And that's why I've partnered with them for 5 years. It's easy and satisfying to start your journey with AG1. Try AG1 free and get a free 1-year free supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/Tina. That's drinkag1.com/Tina. Check it out. Which is a valuable skill to have. Like that, I mean, the lessons you can learn about how to pace yourself, how to listen to your body, how to know what things feel like.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a great thing to give people.
Yes.
And I love that you've found a way to make it so that people can, be in the same place running the same time. It's interesting you say that because I hadn't really thought about the track, but in my communications about plogging, like picking up trash while jogging, that's where I had said was like the one time you can have people of all speeds running together because everyone is bending down to pick up trash. But now I see that actually the track is the original way of doing that. But good to know. So then you called your Girls Run NYC a collective, a women's running collective. Why use that word specifically?
Yeah. So when I first started it, I started it as a pop-up for women from all these different walks of life and different run groups to come. There were no women's only groups at the time. It was also kind of like right before this sort of wave of feminist thought happening again, which I feel like it always sort of like comes in cycles. So I also got some backlash for saying I wanted to do a women's only run, like, which happens always. But I was like, I don't want to start another run crew. I don't want to start another run group. I just wanted to be like pop-up runs and an opportunity to bring women together. So it was called Girls Run With Me was the series. And I kind of promoted it almost like party promoter style, like just put out a flyer. I pulled every woman's email address out of my inbox and like sent it to every woman I knew. And had like 18 people on the first time, which to me was a lot. I was like, oh my God, people want to come to this. And so we kept doing it. And then, naturally there's a group of women that are like, this is all we want to do. We just want to keep being in this group. And so we ended up putting a group together and training for this race in Toronto. And when that happened, I was like, okay, I'm going to get my coaching certification and make this official. It will be a thing, Girls Run NYC. But it's really not meant to be exclusionary. We don't want it to feel like only this group of women are allowed to be there. So it was sort of like an open call for people who were running with all these different groups to come and participate once a week. And that's why I like to keep the word collective, because I want it to feel not like an exclusive club.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I want to just take a little bit of time, just as I'm so curious about this. I've heard of people having art therapists before, but I love that is something you do. So tell the listeners, for someone who maybe hasn't heard of this, and I know you talk a lot about grief and how it shows up in its many forms and over big periods of time. And if you want to share a bit of backstory on that, you're welcome to. But yeah, just love to hear. Let's start with the grief piece of why you feel it's important to speak to how grief shows up, and also sharing your journey of grief, publicly rather than just keeping it inside.
Yes. So my father passed away in June. And thank you. I have decided that it was important for me to talk about, and to talk about publicly. And I think for many different reasons, and I can sort of share my journey as a mental health professional, which will help provide some context as well. But I will say my father had a big impact on my life and also everyone in my family's lives, and was sort of a very central figure. And in his cancer journey, it became important to me to also really lean into my own self-care, because there were so many feelings of helplessness in what he was going through, with all of the complicated health issues that he had. And so I think a big piece of my self-care is also allowing people to help me, which is hard for me and hard for people and hard for women for different reasons. And as someone who's always been the big sister, the helper, healer, the coach, I run Adidas runners communities for the US. So I actually have a really big role.
Yeah.
And what that means is I also want my teams to understand kind of what's going on with me, so that in the days where I am off, you kind of understand why. I think because I interface with people so much, I felt that talking about what I was going through would help people to maybe not personalize it if I'm a little bit short sometimes. And I just found that even in the final years, my dad's cancer, he lived longer than we had known he would live, which was amazing. But sort of in those final years, I found myself not acting like myself at different points. And I thought, a good way to take care of myself is to let people know what's going on with me. So, even in this process now of him having passed, it's a different type of journey for me now. So I've just been sharing about it. And I think in the sharing, it's helped me Just not bottle it up and not put it away, but like try to move through it. Yeah.
Which is something hard to do with the way that we kind of are shown that grief should be dealt with, or what grief looks like to different people might not be how others comprehend it and show it and display it. And so I'm sure you've been helping people with even just speaking to it and sharing about it, and what works and what has been helping you. And so then you said about, your mental health journey and helping others with their own mental health journeys. What would you like to share with us?
Yeah. So I think a little bit of my backstory as well is that I played volleyball competitively. Like as a high schooler, that was actually my primary sport. And I had an opportunity to go to college on a volleyball scholarship or go to art school. And so I actually made the decision to go to art school. And that was one of those moments where you're there's a fork in the road, and I went that way. I studied fine arts at the University of Michigan and learned pretty quickly that I love making art, but I really loved helping other people make art. So I got involved in working with young people that were incarcerated, that were living in juvenile detention when I was 19. I was teaching kids how to make art and using it as a form of self-expression and healing. And it was really, really powerful for me. I loved that work. And so I ended up deciding to study art therapy. So I moved to New York City. I went to NYU. I studied art therapy there, and I became an art therapist. And actually spent a good portion of my career working with teenagers, probably all of my career, actually, as an art therapist. And so running was always this thing I did very much for me. And then, I worked as an art therapist during the day, which is very much in the realm of you study art and psychotherapy. And so I practiced as a therapist in various different settings and loved that work. And also, after 16 years, decided to take like a 1-year break to come on full time as performance coach for adidas running. And then like COVID happened. It was like all this stuff kind of like the world shifted. And I was like, I don't see myself coming back to, I don't see myself coming back to therapy online as an artist.
Oh, yeah. That's very different. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just happened to have like shifted anyways. And so like I've fully been working in sports for the last 4 or 5 years. So it was kind of just the path that I was on. But yeah, I am an art therapist. I think all of my work as a therapist, my sort of understanding of group dynamics and human behavior and mental health, and all of that influences how I coach. It influences how I think about building communities and groups. Absolutely.
Can you just, I do want to hear about some of the, things coming in a minute, but I know you get asked this all the time, but for someone who maybe even never has heard of an art therapist, can you give just the basic overview of like, what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say it's an sort of alternative way of, or modality of participating in psychotherapy. However, there are different schools of thought in how people are trained as art therapists. Okay. And I came out of NYU, which is very psychodynamic. So, we're studying psychoanalysis, and basically the way that different people approach it is either that art itself, like making art itself, is therapeutic, or using art within a therapeutic setting is another form of language that you dialogue with your therapist. And so I kind of, being someone who came at it from the artist side and then studied psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, I really do believe art in itself is therapeutic, but I also understand how to use it as like a tool in basically being able to have a dialogue together between the client and the therapist. And so like with clients that I worked with, it's sort of like any therapeutic relationship, you come into it, very similar to coaching also, you come into it with interviewing each other, understanding what is the goal, why are we going to use this time? It should be time bound. So you're like, okay, we're going to do this for X number of months to go towards this goal. We're going to keep checking in. Are we reaching the goal? What are the goals? And then using the therapy sessions to work towards those goals for that person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. Thank you for sharing. So then, as you said, you've shifted away from that full-time with Adidas. What are some things that you're excited about that are to come that you feel like you've had a real push in making happen that maybe is, you're looking forward to?
Yeah. I'll say sort of two different realms. One, with Adidas runners, I think one of the very cool things, since I've had this US role, I help to lead strategically for our communities in the US, as well as sort of manage the coaches and teams on the ground. We have built our communities now to be almost 62% women.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
Which is really cool. I've helped to really build up leadership in our women coaches. So we have like either equal representation of women coaches or more. In New York, we have 2 head women coaches on a team of 3, which is amazing. And so I feel super proud of that, knowing that it's like when we talk about goals globally with Adidas runners, because it's in like 76 cities, the goal is always like building and bolstering like women in the communities. And for us, like we're there, which feels really nice. So super proud of that work. And then with Girls Run, my like personal project, we are making our 10 years this year. 2024 is our 10th year running. So we are planning our anniversary party, which is in September, which is going to be kind of a run-a-thon. So it'll be 10 hours for 10 years. And we're doing it in a park in Brooklyn. And we'll have a barbecue and a hangout, but also a 10-year challenge for people to run or walk as many loops of this park as they want to in the 10 hours.
Wow.
So it's kind of like a big piece of Girls Run, which I didn't talk about, is that we've somehow over the years built an ultramarathoning group.
Love that.
Within it, which was never the goal. But here we are. And so we have a big group of women who've been ultramarathoning
awesome.
in Girls Run, and we kind of call that subgroup Girls Run Ultras. We actually had a film in the Trail Running Film Festival this year, which one of our athletes originally tried. She was just going to document her journey running Black Canyon, and then ended up turning it into a film. So yeah, super excited about that.
As you should
and
be.
I think,
that's awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to wrap up to remind everyone listening, especially to the women? Maybe is that what really speaks to you? But yeah, anything you'd like to remind anyone of, just the work that you do and what you see and how that can translate to someone who's listening to this?
Yes. I think that one of the women I work with right now, who's an absolute beginner runner, we talk a lot about acceptance of your pace. And once, I feel like that's such a pivotal moment, and it was for me too. Like, once you're like, this is my pace and this is what it is, and I belong here. And really there should be a place for everyone. And I do believe there is space for everyone. But that's like such a huge, like, empowering moment in time, is like accepting like that this is where I'm meant to be. And I think one of the beautiful things I've seen that some people don't like is the explosion of run clubs, right? Like, there's a different run club on every corner, and with different themes and like different names. And sometimes people get into this whole like, well, who really should be running, or like, who's been around the longest, or what's better, this or that. And I think there's space for it all. I think there's space for everyone. And I also have always said, if you don't see the space that you want to be in, that you should make it, and just invite someone else to come to that space, and someone else will come. So I still think there's more space, and the more people moving their bodies, the better. Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Such an important piece. And just for being that beacon for people in the community. You've obviously had a huge impact. I'm excited to see what the years to come, what the 20-year reunion or coming together looks like, what you're able to build with more time with Adidas, and just appreciate you. So keep up the amazing work, and thank you for joining me. Thanks, Tina. Before we go any further, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Running for Real team. Without them, I would not be able to do barely anything compared to what I'm able to do today. They are behind the scenes. They are there for me. I am just so appreciative of them. To Jeremy Nessel, our podcast editor, audio consultant, and someone who's been with me since the start. To Sally Pontarelli, our content and operations manager, who is there day to day doing all the things to help me be successful. To Kelsey Wang, our head of design, and Louise Murphy, our associate designer. And finally, to Sandy Gutierrez, our photographer and content strategist. I am appreciative of all of you and wouldn't be able to do what I do without you. Really enjoyed that conversation with Jessie. I hope you did too, and I hope you go follow along with her on social media, and also make sure you are going to check out some of the events that she's hosting as they come up. They are always awesome and really well thought out, very different, very fun and unique. So go check those out. You can find links to Jessie as well as all the things we talked about today in the show notes by going to runningforreal.com/episode 413. You can also find links to our sponsors in there. Thank you to Hydro Pack, to Runna, and to AG1. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week.